She trusted the one person who was supposed to protect her. But after that night, Suzanne Simpson was never seen the same way again. What happened next raised questions no one has been able to answer, and the truth may be closer than anyone expected.
6 months ago, Suzanne Simpson vanished. Prosecutors believe the Olmos Park mother was murdered by her husband. Tonight, he's sitting in the Bexar County Jail as investigators work to find Suzanne's body.
Months after Suzanne Simpson vanished, her case remained unresolved, not because of a lack of activity or attention, but because the most basic element of closure had never been recovered. There was no body, no confirmed location of her remains, and no final physical evidence made that could answer the simplest questions about her death. What investigators were left with instead was a dense and methodical trail of actions, movements, and decisions that suggested planning and control rather than chaos or confusion. The case troubled law enforcement and the community alike because it did not resemble a sudden act followed by panic, but rather a sequence of deliberate steps that appeared designed to erase a person while preserving plausible uncertainty. Suzanne Simpson had not lived a quiet or hidden life. She was visible in her profession, present in her community, and deeply involved in the lives of her children. Her disappearance created an immediate and unsettling absence, precisely because she was so reliably accounted for in daily life. Friends, colleagues, and family members knew her routines, her habits, and her priorities, which made the abrupt end of those routines impossible to ignore. Suzanne was 51 years old and lived in Alamo Heights, Texas, an affluent and closely connected community where neighbors were accustomed to noticing deviations from normal patterns. She was a successful luxury real estate agent with more than a decade of experience in the San Antonio market, where she was known for her deep knowledge and relentless work ethic.
In 2009, Suzanne left her job as an account manager and started working as a real estate agent. The brokerage she worked for specialized in luxury homes. By 2024, Suzanne and Brad lived in the house along with 2 of their children.
Her colleagues described her as someone who never stopped working when a client needed her, regardless of time zones or inconvenience. She built her career on consistency, reliability, and an ability to manage complex transactions with calm focus. Outside of work, Suzanne maintained an equally disciplined personal life. She was an accomplished distance runner who completed more than 20 marathons and trained daily, often covering several miles each morning. Running was not simply a hobby for her, but a structured part of her identity that reflected her persistence and self-control. Friends described her as energetic and optimistic, someone who approached challenges with determination rather than complaint. Suzanne's most defining role, however, was that of a mother. She had 4 children whose ages spanned from early childhood to young adulthood, and she remained actively involved in each of their lives.
She would run about 8 miles every day, but most importantly, Suzanne was a mother. Her 4 children were aged 20, 18, 15, and just 5 years old.
She coordinated school schedules, extracurricular activities, and family responsibilities with the same precision she applied to her professional work. Those who knew her described her as someone who never missed an obligation and who took pride in being present for her children at every stage of their lives. She had been married to Brad Simpson for 22 years, and together they lived in a century-old bungalow in Alamo Heights. From the outside, their life appeared stable and established, reflecting long-term residence in a desirable neighborhood. Brad worked in real estate investment and construction-related ventures throughout Central Texas and was well known in local business circles. He was tall, confident, and outwardly assertive, characteristics that many associates initially interpreted as ambition. Over time, however, Brad's professional and personal history revealed instability beneath that confidence. Records showed repeated financial difficulties, including lawsuits for unpaid debts and a pattern of failed or dissolved business entities. Former colleagues and acquaintances later described him as intensely jealous and controlling, particularly within his marriage. According to multiple accounts provided to investigators, Brad monitored Suzanne's movements by tracking her phone and frequently questioned her whereabouts. In the months leading up to her disappearance, the control escalated into violence. Suzanne confided in her personal banker that Brad had been physically abusive and that he sometimes took her phone away from her. She explained that when this happened, Brad would tell their children that she had simply misplaced it, effectively isolating her while maintaining an appearance of normalcy within the household. During this conversation, Suzanne made a statement that would later become deeply unsettling, when she said that if she ever went missing, she should be searched for in a lake. Despite these disclosures, there were no formal police reports or protective orders in place at the time. Like many cases of domestic abuse, the violence remained largely hidden from public view. Suzanne's mother was aware of at least one prior physical altercation and had begun planning for Suzanne to leave the marriage. Arrangements were being discussed that would allow Suzanne and her youngest child to relocate safely, but those plans were never put into action.
Barbara had developed a plan for Suzanne to move in with her. The youngest child would attend school in Barbara's neighborhood, but Suzanne vanished the night she called to report that Brad had hurt her again. She never heard the plan.
On the evening of October 6th, 2024, Suzanne and Brad attended a private event at an exclusive members-only dining club, bringing their youngest child with them. Multiple witnesses later reported observing a heated verbal argument between the couple that disrupted the event. According to the account later provided by their child, Brad pushed Suzanne against a wall during the confrontation, causing visible distress. Suzanne left the club with her daughter before the event concluded and was later captured on surveillance footage shopping briefly at a grocery store. During this time, she made several phone calls, including one to a friend to say she was coming over and another to her mother to report that Brad had assaulted her and that she was experiencing pain. At nearly the exact same moment as that call, Brad accessed their shared mobile account and suspended Suzanne's phone service, effectively cutting off her ability to communicate. Suzanne did go to a friend's home for a short period, but less than an hour later, her phone's location data placed it back at the Simpson residence. That data point would become the last confirmed digital location associated with her device. Later that night, a neighbor across the street heard arguing outside the Simpson home that steadily grew louder. When the neighbor looked outside, he observed Suzanne and Brad engaged in a physical struggle in the front garden, with Suzanne attempting to break free and Brad appearing to restrain her. Suzanne eventually managed to escape his grasp and ran toward a wooded area near the home, while Brad chased after her. Moments later, the neighbor heard several screams coming from the wooded area, after which there was silence. Those sounds marked the last time Suzanne Simpson was ever heard. Around midnight, Brad's pickup truck left the residence and returned approximately 1 to 2 hours later. From that point forward, his movements became increasingly calculated. Forensic analysis later showed that his phone was repeatedly placed into lockdown mode, cycling on and off in a pattern consistent with efforts to avoid digital tracking.
Authorities also note in the affidavit that Brad's phone was not very helpful to detectives because it had apparently been intentionally turned off and then on and off right around that time, allegedly to prevent it from collecting any data.
In the early morning hours, surveillance cameras captured Brad driving with various items in the bed of his truck, including large trash bags, a heavy-duty bin, and a sizable cooler. Subsequent footage revealed an additional, bulky object wrapped in a tarp and weighted down with a metal rack, arranged in a way that investigators believed was intended to conceal its contents. Brad visited a hardware store and purchased cement, heavy-duty trash bags, disinfectant, and other supplies, paying in cash despite typically using electronic payment methods. He asked a stranger in the parking lot for directions to the nearest landfill. Over the course of the morning and early afternoon, Brad traveled across multiple counties, stopping at various locations. During these trips, items gradually disappeared from the truck bed, including the trash bags and the tarp-wrapped object. At one point, Brad changed his footwear from sandals to heavy boots, a detail investigators later noted as part of a broader pattern of preparation and concealment. That afternoon, Suzanne failed to pick up her youngest child from school, something that had never happened before. Hours passed before Brad arrived to retrieve the child, not explain. Despite Suzanne's absence and missed responsibilities, Brad did not report her missing. Nearly 24 hours after Suzanne was last seen or heard from, a concerned friend contacted Brad and expressed alarm that police had not been notified. Only then did Brad leave a message for local law enforcement, claiming he had not seen Suzanne since the previous night and suggesting she had lost her phone earlier in the evening. This statement was contradicted by phone records and account activity showing that he had personally suspended her service. Brad failed to cooperate with investigators and missed scheduled interviews, choosing instead to relocate to a rural family property. During this period, he contacted a former business associate with urgent messages instructing him to secure and conceal items from a weapons vault. He also created written notes on his phone, apologizing for prior assaults on Suzanne and expressing remorse to family members for the problems he had caused.
When Brad was arrested that same day, the police seized his phone. There were 2 notes on it, which were created on Tuesday, October 8. In the notes, Brad apologized for assaulting Suzanne in August 2023.
When Brad was eventually arrested on related charges, investigators noted that he displayed little visible reaction and did not appear surprised. He invoked his right to legal counsel and remained silent throughout questioning. Searches of the family home revealed physical damage consistent with the child's account of violence, as well as missing supplies that matched items seen in surveillance footage. Authorities also discovered illegal firearms in a locked room. At a separate property, investigators located a burn site containing destroyed electronic devices belonging to Brad. Weeks later, additional concealed weapons were recovered from the home of a former associate, who was subsequently charged with tampering with evidence. In December, a grand jury indicted Brad Simpson for murder, alleging that he had concealed a motorized saw bearing Suzanne's DNA. Prosecutors acknowledged that Suzanne's body had not been recovered, but argued that the absence of remains did not prevent them from establishing intent and causation. The defense challenged the indictment, claiming that without a body or a specific cause of death, the charges were insufficient. The court ultimately ruled that the case could proceed to trial. As months passed, extensive searches continued across multiple counties, including wooded areas, landfills, and rural properties. Despite these efforts, Suzanne's remains were never found. Her children provided statements that contradicted their father's version of events, and her eldest daughter publicly accused him of acting out of rage and control, urging others to speak out about domestic violence. By the fall of 2025, the case file had grown to encompass terabytes of digital and physical evidence, including surveillance footage, phone records, forensic analyses, and witness testimony. What remained missing was the physical presence of Suzanne herself. Brad Simpson remained in custody awaiting trial, while Suzanne's family continued to live with the uncertainty left by her disappearance. The case forced the community to confront difficult questions about appearances, accountability, and how control can operate quietly within private spaces. Investigators noted that many of the warning signs present in Suzanne Simpson's life were known only in fragments by different people, none of whom had the full picture before it was too late. Financial instability, controlling behavior, and escalating abuse existed alongside professional success and social standing, creating a disconnect that delayed intervention and muted urgency.
Brad's negative personality characteristics, Suzanne probably hoped for the best. Leaving Brad would have come with a lot of emotional and financial turmoil. Staying with him came with an elevated risk of homicide.
Legal experts observing the case emphasized that prosecutions without a recovered body required jurors to rely heavily on patterns of behavior rather than a single defining moment. In this instance, the prosecution's theory rested on consistency, arguing that Brad Simpson's actions before and after Suzanne's disappearance formed a coherent narrative of intent, violence, and concealment. The defense, by contrast, maintained that the absence of remains left too many unanswered questions, asserting that circumstantial evidence alone could not replace definitive proof of death. For Suzanne's children, the legal arguments unfolded alongside a deeply personal reality, shaped by loss without physical confirmation. They were left to reconcile memories of their mother's presence with an absence that never resolved into finality. Their statements to investigators and public advocacy reflected not only grief, but also an insistence that silence should not be mistaken for uncertainty. As pre-trial hearings continued, Suzanne's case became a reference point in discussions about accountability and the limitations of visibility. Her disappearance underscored how control can persist unnoticed, how preparation can masquerade as normal routine, and how justice must sometimes proceed without the comfort of complete answers. In the absence of a body, Suzanne Simpson's story remained defined not by what was found, but by what could no longer be ignored.